Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to welcome everybody to the launch of one of Agenda's latest journals themed Cultural Dialogues for Feminist Creatives, Southern Voices, edited by Dr. Leanne Lewitz and Ms. Ongezwa Mbele. By way of introduction, it is necessary to place today's journal launch into its proper context. At the height of apartheid's repression in South Africa, a group of inspired and inspiring young women came together to play their role in the struggle towards freedom. These young feminists set out to bring the fight against women's repression into the political equation, and they succeeded by founding Agenda, South Africa's first feminist journal, in 1979. Agenda ensures that feminist issues are taken to women's groups where issues affecting women can be brought to light, and organize workshops and initiate debate, and voice the demand that the rights of women be fully incorporated into the agenda for a democratic South Africa. Over the past 42 years, Agenda has made a remarkable contribution by giving women a forum, a voice, and skills to articulate their needs and interests to transform unequal gender relations. Consequently, fundamental societal change has been achieved. This struggle continues in a number of critical and interesting ways, as is evident in the journal being launched today. Thank you for your interest in Agenda and for your continued support.
A very warm greetings to everyone. It is my enormous pleasure to welcome you to the launch of a new journal by Agenda. Myself and Ongezwa Mbele, my colleague and friend, were the co-editors on the journal, the guest editors, and we are delighted in this age of COVID to be bringing you a digital launch of the journal, and hopefully, given the nature of what the journal is, a little bit of enjoyment, a little bit of fun, a little bit of engagement with the creative possibilities of the digital platform. So the journal that we are launching today is called Cultural Dialogues for Feminist Creatives, Southern Voices. And it is a journal that is very close to both Ongezwa and my heart, because both of us are artists, sort of artist scholars, artist practitioners. And we found a way in this journal to look at the creative, the generation of creativity and creative work by some of the Southern scholars and Southern artists. And we've looked at ways of writing and narrating the stories that they're being told. We're particularly proud of the journal because it does bring together voices from the whole continent, and so we see this incredible connection between creativity, between Africa, and the idea that culture is a way in which we begin to speak around identity, and particularly for this issue of the journal, the idea of intersectional identities. The journal has a whole range of articles, and I'm going to ask Ongezwa in a moment to talk about them, but it falls to me just to first of all say thank you very much to Agenda for inviting Ongezwa and I to work with them on this issue. To say thank you also to Lou Haysom, who was the editor that worked with us from Agenda. She was kind and generous, and I felt like I'd learned a whole lot from her. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank also Ongezwa, my sister partner, who worked with me in this. I've learned so much from her, and just a most wonderful journey in terms of creating this journal. It's also important for us to say at the beginning of this that this journal was conceptualized before COVID hit. And the idea of looking at live and embodied performance and cultural practices, whether it's art or dance or theatre making, was a strange thing when COVID hit, because this journal, the articles were edited during the hard lockdown in 2020. And it seemed like a really strange thing to be doing during that early stages of the lockdown, was looking at and reading over and working with young writers who were writing about live and embodied practices that were not possible at the time of editing the journal. So we also, noticing that gap, we also invited two writers, Betty Govenden and Lauren Warnaker, to write about COVID and cultural practice. So the journal does begin to reflect a little bit on what the pandemic has meant for the arts and culture sector, and of course it has been devastating. So the journal is, in many ways, there's a lot of nostalgia, but there's also a lot of wonderful new scholarship for a time of live and embodied practice. And we hope more than anything that this journal brings to light some of the very important issues that face feminist scholarship in the South around culture and cultural practices. We're also particularly proud of the fact that we were able to nurture and guide some young writers, and that their work, so for some of them, it's their first time being published in an academic journal, and we're absolutely delighted about that. So I'm going to hand over to my friend, my colleague, Ongezwa, to talk a little bit about the content of the journal.
Hi everyone, welcome to the launch of the journal titled Cultural Dialogues for Feminist Voices. The journal was informed by various theorists. Bell Hooks' feminist theory was one of them, and this notion of that we're thinking and speaking from the margins. So how do these cultural workers who predominantly don't get to write scholarly can engage in the work and reflect about their work? So we made that space open for cultural workers and to reflect about their work. Stuart Hall's notion of cultural identities also informs the framing of the journal. So we have voices of contributors from all walks of life, ranging from Nigeria to Kenya to Botswana to South Africa to Durban, Free State, and the subject matters that all these authors reflect about predominantly are personal, and they are political, and they are engaging the works that they do within their context. So the one subject matter that is interesting is that we've got a contributor looking at Celeste Ntuli's comedy work, the notion of having a black female comedian work. What does that mean within the South African context of comedy and the history of comedy? We've got someone, a contributor, looking at indigenous music instruments, umakweyana it's called, and reflecting on their journey. We've got directors reflecting on their work, theatre directors and their theatre making processes. We've got someone discussing about topics and subject matters of erotica. We've got conversations about dance, and it ranges, and how these contributors are grappling within creating knowledge and documenting and archiving their work. So it could be part of a long-term discussion or an ongoing conversation that is needed. The journal was compiled in the midst of COVID times. So we've got Betty, who is my very favorite person. She is a walking, talking anthology who writes and contributes about what it means for us artists to do work in the times of COVID. We've got Lauren in Chicago, also looking from the perspective of dance and the challenges that this virus has brought to us as cultural workers. And the conversations and the writing are robust. And we've got a beautiful poem from a woman poet in Nigeria. She's an Igbo poet. And the poem is about centering women's voices, engaging the lineage of women who are Igbo speaking and Igbo culture. And basically, the journey is about centering the voices and stories of feminist women.
So for the launch on this kind of beautiful digital platform, which is unusual and at a time when we can't all come together as creatives just to celebrate the work that we make and that we do, what we have done is invited some of the participants in the journal to speak a little bit about their papers and to speak a little bit about their contribution to the journal. And so for me, it's just to welcome them all and to say thank you for making your little videos and sending them to us. It's been a lovely experience, a creative experience of editing in another kind of way. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of those who wrote and participated in the journal. It was such a pleasure meeting all of you online and reading your work and learning from all of you. So sit back and enjoy, and just a moment to celebrate the creative power of women.
Hi everybody, my name is Tobegile. I'm one of the contributors to the journal agenda. My paper research was based on Umakoyana, who gets to teach me. While what the paper is basically about my journey as a Black woman of our time who plays indigenous instruments like Umakoyana, which you just saw me play, which in the traditional sense or in the Nguni sense, it used to be an instrument that was played by women. And looking at the timeline of how things have evolved over time and the introduction of institutionalization and how it moved from women and now having men as the leading force in sharing knowledge about Umakoyana. But what I did find is that the lack of women folk in the forefront regarding this instrument is quite disheartening, because it's not that they don't exist, but somehow they are cut off from being able to share their skills. I mean, my mentor, Kokuba Vigilengema, she's all the way in Esho, a brilliant woman, well-knowledged, full of knowledge regarding the instrument, from which sticks to pick, how the calabash is ripe and ready, well of knowledge that I feel that we should have access to as women. So basically the paper is just focusing on the different women that I've come across who play these instruments, who should be teachers of this instrument but are not, women who are not recognized for their contribution in the knowledge production of indigenous instruments. And I also look at the idea of gatekeeping and how it looks like, and how higher learning institutions also play a role in the gatekeeping and choosing a few to represent a whole culture, basically. And women are not those in that forefront. I mean, probably now things are changing, who knows. I really felt good for Agenda Journal to asked me to be part of the program. It wasn't easy, I won't lie. I had moments where I was really hurt. I'm hurt by the knowledge that we receive and how do we digest the knowledge of realization. I guess that's what knowledge does. It comes and it shakes you up and gives you fresh perspective. Also having to write academically, where you have to go beyond than what you think and what you feel, and then also using a certain type of language to address what I'm trying to address. I found that very frustrating, looking at how, obviously it was positive feedback. I had really good support from the ladies from UKZN while I was writing my paper, but I had a moment where I was just like, I do not want to do this anymore. I don't have the words. Maybe I'm not as clever as I think. Maybe I'm not as academic as I think. Maybe I'm not as intellectual as I think, because all I'm trying to say is this, but it keeps on evolving to that. And then now I have to explain the part that is evolving away from what I was initially trying to put across. But eventually the paper was done after a good number of months and patience and understanding and a lot of tears, a lot of starting over again. But once you get into the groove, you're in the groove. Then the words just pour out, and then it's just a matter of trimming them so that they fit in the language or the tone that is required from us. Right now, I'm because of having handed in my paper, I'm now inspired to do another one regarding still the bowl music history and story and current times and archiving. So thank you very much to the agenda for allowing me a voice as a woman who's doing amongst my community, preserving and promoting and developing Indigenous music, and also the new knowledge production of Indigenous music and the freedom of expression regarding our Indigenous music. Thank you very much, and peace to all beings.
My name is Karabelo Lekalake Plaki. I'm an actor, I'm a director, I'm a researcher, I'm a storyteller, I curate works, I'm a theater maker. So I got into really telling stories because I guess growing up I've always been a shy child, and I've always wondered how I can make an impact in my world, and that's really how I got attracted into theater. The kind of stories that I love really telling is stories that focuses on women, simply because I feel like given our history as South Africans, women in theaters have always been at the background. So one of the biggest works that I've really done is the Kamaku Theatre and Dance Festival. Really, the idea came with a very good friend of mine, my colleague, my partner, Lebulisa. She said, I've got this idea and I want us to do it as an organization. We are running an NPO called Free State Movement in Theatre. So she came in, she said, I've got an idea. I want us to do a festival that really celebrates our Indigenous languages, that celebrates our culture as Black people. So this really got me excited because I come from a background, an academic background, where as a scholar I was taught to really study Shakespeare or European theatre, but not really embrace our Indigenous stories. So immediately when she came with this idea, I was like, yes, and we ran with it. We decided that we're going to host a 10-day festival where we will invite 10 different shows. Really, our main focus was to do a festival that will showcase the works of Free State artists, But then we also knew that we wanted to uphold a certain standard. So we had to go look out of the province. We went to Johannesburg and said, okay, there's this artist who has created this specific work. There's somebody in Cape Town, there's somebody in Johannesburg. And then we said, let's bring everybody together. So we hosted a 10-day festival where we did dance shows, where we also did theater shows, where we hosted a colloquium, where we also did workshops. So I'm saying this is one of the biggest works that I've done because in my career of creating theater, I don't think I've ever been as passionate as I am now with this kind of work that we did, to a point that I thought it was necessary for me to document it even more. This is how the idea for the article really came about. I also looked at the important role that a female figure holds in the society, in actually making sure that a child knows their languages. And I mean, we did this festival in a very colonized city. So we shifted a certain paradigm. We did something that had never been done before in the Free State, in South Africa. And it was important for me to document the festival. To be published, oh my gosh. I'm still not over that. It's beyond words, because I never thought I can contribute as a scholar in academic articles, but it brings a great feeling, and I've sent the link to a lot of people, and the feedback that I get really about the work, it's really amazing. So I still love being part of this awesome journal. Being published means that I could die tomorrow and my work can still live. And I love that. I think this is what I love about the opportunity that I got to be part of this amazing journal. I know that I could die and people can still read about my work. And I love the fact that the journal really celebrates women that are creating work.
Hi, my name is Pelisiwa, and I am a theater director and a fiction writer. So I wrote an article called Engaging Athol Fugat's Nongoko, Feminist Reflections from South African Director. I will be looking down on my notes because I don't want to lose my train of thought, and usually when I speak, I tend to pause. And besides, I only have less than 5 minutes. So yeah, I wrote an article for Agenda, and it was a great process, a challenging process, a process that made me think a lot and scared me totally. But in this article, I discuss my journey in directing Athol Fugat's play, where I take up the directorial process of revisioning this play as a feminist play. The article explores and discusses the journey and processes of adapting the play into the now, and what makes the play a feminist play. We focus on the plays that were previously directed throughout the decade by the male directors and their processes and what their goal was in directing and how they envisioned the play. And also what I focused on is the protagonist, which was our leeway in understanding her as a Black woman who made choices that were misunderstood. We also discuss how Nongoko, the play, for decades has been about the social vision of how apartheid impacted on Black lives. We talk about the stage adaptation, we discuss the settings, we discuss how we used language and costume to contemporize the play, but to make it more relative as well to the Black audience. We, all of that, we use it to re-envision Queenie as a formidable figure whom the audience can empathize with. So while we were writing, the things that came out of the play or the article was that we didn't change the script. Everything that we needed to understand the play as a feminist was already there. Adolf Huger did that. We just allowed the play to reflect the times we were in, to renew its focus a bit. And Nongoko was written in the times where our country back then was socially and politically unstable. And me as a young woman of South Africa in 2019 then, when we wrote the article, we wanted to engage why the play should put focus on Black women, on a woman, and why we should not end up internalizing our shame and policing women for the choices they made. So yeah, that's the article. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Precious Simba, and I'm one of the contributors to the Agenda edition, special edition, and I co-authored an article with Professor Nuran Davids on titled Cultivating Third Space Thinking in African Feminism through the works of Nandipha Mtambo. A little bit about ourselves. I'm going to speak for the both of us. Professor Davids is a professor of philosophy of education based at Stellenbosch University in the Faculty of Education. And her work is around philosophy of education, around Islamic education, feminist theory, and democratic citizenship education, amongst other things. And I am also at Stellenbosch University in the same department, Education Policy Studies, as Professor Davids, and I am at the tail end of my PhD, and I'm studying a feminist critique of Ubuntu, looking at Ubuntu as a philosophy of education, and my research areas are around feminist theory, Ubuntu as a philosophy of education, intersectionality, critical theory, democratic citizenship education. But for us, in terms of this call, the connection point between Professor Davids and I in writing this article together is our special interest in capturing the experiences of women, and also as people who are, as scholars of philosophy of education, just thinking philosophically about some profound questions within feminism. And we were drawn to the work of Nandipha Mtambo because of the nature in which that it challenges our thinking conceptually. And there is a number of ways to look at art. We can look at it in terms of its effect. We can look at it as the impact it has on the cultural imagination. But for us, it was the impact that it has on us conceptually in terms of how we think about certain things. And for us, we found that Nandipha Mtambo graces this in between, this interstice of, even in her own words, looking at beauty and repulsion, attraction and repulsion, looking at these in-betweens, but at the same time opening up a door to look beyond the duality. And that for us was the attraction point. That for us was the point that we saw her artwork opening a door for us to begin to think in different terms about feminism, particularly her Cowhide series. We found it was very moving in that it allows us to begin to think or to challenge our own imaginary concerning these bodies that she is representing in her art. And we took it to be a challenge to female subjectivity, and allowed us to begin to think in unique ways. And so we wrote that article. And pairing Mtambo and Homi Baba for us was quite an interesting journey, because they're two unlikely companions conceptually. But then we found that Mtambo materializes what Baba only theorizes about. And in this art form, we find that theory finds a fuller expression. And that for us is what drew us to this special edition, is how we can, how creatives find these unique ways to extend the cultural imaginary. And I think I've already said that. And so we felt very, very privileged to be part of this work and honored to be chosen to publish among such great creatives, thinkers, within the African continent and beyond. And we're hoping for critical engagement and feedback as we continue to theorize about these issues that matter most to us within feminism, about the feminist subject, about experiences of women, for example. How can we project them, of women on the African continent and beyond? How can we capture them more authentically and present, and there's that political word, represent them as authentically as we can as scholars and as creatives. It was a challenge because we work in the domain of philosophy, philosophy of education. So to connect with creatives, I think this speaks volumes of the project that the editors of this special edition did, because they broke down a few boundaries in terms of thinking, in terms of presentation, and I think this is what makes the special edition that much more interesting and relevant, especially in this world that a lot of things are being broken down. So we congratulate the editors, we congratulate the journal, the editors of the journal, the editors of the special edition for this great work, and we are looking forward to more critical engagement as we move forward and feedback even on our work. Thank you so much. Bye.
The arts in the time of pandemic. I'm Betty Govindan, and I shall read excerpts from my essay. Together apart, hope springs eternal. There have been many spectacular events where creativity and generosity have been freely offered to nurture and sustain hope in this time of crisis. In South Africa, the virtual choral production by Rodin School in Johannesburg is particularly noteworthy. Their earthy and impassioned rendition of Leonard Cohen's Sing Hallelujah has been for me personally a most uplifting experience during this period of lockdown. The choir's collective motto, #Together apart in uncertain times, but together in spirit and song, was poignant at a time when the school, like millions across the world, is officially closed. And as I looked at our world in so many different ways, Cohen's ringing phrase, broken hallelujah, took on a deeply resonant meaning. Nancy Richards, well-known South African radio personality, has written of the incalculable role of the arts during this time of the corona pandemic. The title of her piece is Crisis Crash Course. And she writes, "It came almost out of the blue, like a viral knife into the heart of the arts. And as the blood pooled around closed theaters, postponed productions and performances, cancelled concerts, and festivals that fell one by one like dominoes, tears flowed. They flowed for all the hard work, all the passion, time, and energy wasted, snuffed out like so many candle flames. But even as the tears dried in salty streams, new sparks ignited. Amazingly, within days, even hours, ideas and WhatsApp started to circulate, and all sorts of creative flickers grew and turned into a virtual field of flames. Interviews and solo concerts started happening on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Zoom and Skype flung open. Distance made collective videos and mini movies came together. Online stories were told. Books published at the speed of light. Podcasts were resurrected or birthed, and all with the potential for audiences worldwide. Extraordinary phenomena catapulted us all into a digital arena some had only seen in a crystal ball. What is for sure, things will never be the same again in the arts, or any industry or human endeavor for that matter. The best we can do is to be hopeful, be caring, be completely open to new ideas and suggestions, and above all, not to be afraid, but brave. Thank you.
Sometimes the writing comes out of me as lava. My flesh and bones seem to be the crust of the earth in rapture. My heart is the plans breaking, the release from the depth of my soul onto paper is the fire. The ashes, the burns, the debris, the words, the life. In all of this, I never know what the words will be on paper, on me, in sight, in memory, in life. Sometimes my moment of writing are the soul's calling, or the earth calling for the rain after a drought of not being able to write. The taste of the rain quenches my thirst. In the tips of my tongue, of my ink, as I speak and I write the words. It is the quench to my life, to my humanity, because sometimes I write to keep sane, to stay alive, to remember, to know that I existed, to archive the lineage of my ancestors, to know and dream of where I'm going. To write is to hope